back to part 2 of the mysterious and crazy bizarre case of JonBenét Ramsey. I'm Juliana.
I'm Barb.
And we're going to continue on into part 2. Again, thank you for all your support, your comments, questions, likes, all that stuff. If you can continue doing that, we can bring more stories like this to you. So we're going to go ahead and continue on for part 2. So sit back, relax as we get into delve even deeper and deeper into this case of JonBenét Ramsey and her disappearance and the eventual murder. I'm going to tell a little bit about how, starting a little bit of my personal stuff with this. One story. This was shortly before her murder. It was like about a week before. I was in Colorado, obviously, and I was in Pearl Street Mall, which is a long street in Boulder, downtown Boulder, that is decorated for Christmas. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it's a mall that you can go to any time of the year. But at Christmas time especially, it's really decorated and it's beautiful. And a lot of storefronts that had beautiful Christmas displays. And my dad and I were there. We were getting a gift for his fiance. I think it was actually his wife. They just got married. And we were there, and I saw this little girl with her mama. And they had kiosks up and down the street. And they were selling roasted chestnuts with balloons, and they had some that had hot cocoa and things, different kinds of things up and down this thing. This little girl went to the one that had chestnuts, and the guy had a bunch of balloons tied to the side of it. And this little girl saw the one that had a puppy dog on it, holding I think it was Santa's hat or a stocking or something, and she was wanting that. And they were like $1 or 50 cents, something expensive. And I had happened to be standing there with my dad, and I saw this because we were all waiting in line to get, I think it was chestnuts or hot cocoa or whatever. And this little girl wanted this, and we were ahead of it, so I went and paid the 50 cents, got the balloon, and handed this to this little girl and said, "Merry Christmas." And she got her mom got her stuff, and they both waved and wished us Merry Christmas and walked on. What I wouldn't know was that, the whole world would know who that little girl would be in about 2 weeks. It was actually JonBenét and Patsy. They had been at Pearl Street Mall doing their Christmas shopping. And at the time, I didn't even, it was just a beautiful little girl. She was in her little winter coat and stuff and with her mama.
And a civilian look.
I didn't realize it was the same. Even when I saw the pictures, I didn't realize it was the same girl until I happened to see a family picture of JonBenét with the rest of the family. I saw who she looked like. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was the little girl that my dad and I bumped into at Pearl Street Mall. It's like a week or so right before Christmas.
Yeah, I think you noticed. I think you said you recognized Patsy too.
And
so Patsy, the combination of the two of them. Oh my goodness.
So, okay, it's like, okay, it freaks me out a little bit, to be honest. It's like, oh my God, I just was talking to that little girl. I gave her a balloon. Oh my God. It's oh gosh, the TV show Quantum Leap, when the Kiss with Destiny. I had a kiss with Destiny with JonBenét. But yeah, it's, she was so different when she looked in real life compared to when she looked in the pageant that it was hard to know.
You probably gave her a nice memory, if it was only for 2 weeks, but a nice memory of somebody noticing her as herself. Mm-hmm. And
instead of the pageant girl, which
fawning over the poofed up.
But sadly enough, nobody really knew what she really looked like. Everybody knows the pageant look, and it unfortunately added a massive stigmata to this case. It really did. So we're going to continue.
Patsy would have gotten more sympathy if she had shown the normal pictures
of JonBenét. Yeah,
it's as though she wasn't.
That was all appearances to her.
Yeah, that's.
Which I'll get into more a little bit later on here in a minute. But yeah, it was all about appearances, and she wanted her daughter to look the best, the prettiest she thought. When in actuality, she looked like a 22-year-old in a 6-year-old's body. It didn't look right. She was cute and she was a beautiful child, so. But it is what it is. But anyways, I digress. We're going to continue on here. From the day in 1996 when JonBenét was found dead in the basement of her home in Boulder, Colorado, the Boulder police and a large portion of the world's media believed that her parents, John and Patsy, were responsible for her death. Prior to the murder, the murder of their daughter, John and Patsy's life seemed almost ideal. Patsy, a former beauty queen, was married to a successful businessman. They moved to Boulder, where John ran a computer company. He had started in his garage in 1991. The Ramseys steadily adapted to their new life in Colorado and made many, many, many new friends, basically in the same circle that my parents ran in. They built a large house in an elite suburb and entertained often. They were, it was always, keeping up with the Joneses. It was always an appearance thing. Their last party in Boulder, just 3 days before the murder, was particularly happy. Over 100 guests were present. I can't believe 100 guests in a home. Woo. I don't know if I know 100 people. Yeah. Sorry, it just kind of threw me there for a second. Were present at this Christmas function. The Ramseys believed that they had a good reason to celebrate. Patsy was warded off by a reoccurrence of ovarian cancer, and John had been voted the best businessman of the year. Something that Boulder also did, and this is something that the police were also investigating, is that every year Boulder had what was called the Parade of Homes. And it was all the wealthy homes in Boulder would open up their homes and have a tour. You go from, and it was a scheduled tour from a certain time to a certain time. You start from one section, you work your way through, and it was parading all these different homes and how these wealthy families would decorate for the holidays.
Yeah.
And so the Ramsey home was a part of the Parade of Homes. According to the Ramsey testimony, they drove home a few blocks from a party at a friend's home on Christmas night. JonBenét had fallen asleep in the car, so they carried her upstairs and put her into a room and put her to bed between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. Shortly after, Patsy and John went to bed themselves, as they planned to get prepared to get up early for their trip to their holiday home in Lake Michigan, where they were supposed to be joining, according to them, their two older children, and then they were all going to journey down to Florida to get on to the Disney cruise for a Disney family cruise later on within the coming week. The next day, Patsy woke up just after 5 a.m. and walked down the stairs to the kitchen. On the staircase, she found the 2.5-page note that said JonBenét had been kidnapped by a small foreign faction and was being held for ransom of $118,000. She was to be exchanged for the money, JonBenét was to be exchanged for the money the next day. The letter warned that if the money was not delivered, the child would be executed. Patsy yelled to John, and she ran back up the stairs and opened the door to JonBenét's room. Finding that she wasn't there, she made the decision to call the police. The 911 dispatcher recorded Patsy's call at 5:25 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. The police arrived at the house within 7 minutes. There's a discrepancy again. Because we can't get phone records.
Right.
We can't justify. So it was roughly within 3 to 7 minutes by the time the first police arrived. The uniformed officers that attended were openly suspicious from the start. The Ramseys were treating the ransom demand seriously. They were already taking steps to raise the ransom money. The note said the kidnappers would call John Ramsey, but no call ever came. It was while the police were waiting for the call that they made several critical mistakes. And I know we're rehashing some stuff, but I wanted to give it from a little bit different perspective. They made several critical mistakes. They did not conduct a proper search of the house. The area was not sealed off, and friends were allowed to walk all over the house. Let us say, walk in and out of the house, all around the house at their leisure. No moves were made to protect any of the forensic evidence. The scale of their mistakes became very apparent later that afternoon when Detective asked Fleet White, a friend of the Ramseys, to take John and search the house for anything unusual. And normally I would say, okay, I always tell people to take comparison shots. And what that means is basically taking pictures of your home. Inside, outside, around, outside of your home, even in your apartment, your car, places that that are personal to you. And I'm not saying clean it up, make it look neat and tidy. I want it to look like what it looks like every single day of your life. So that way, if something does happen to you or to your loved one or a family member, the police can come in, and when they take their pictures, they can compare it. Is that picture frame supposed to be on that shelf? Yep. It is. They can compare what it's supposed to look like on a normal average day and what they're seeing on their crime scene. And so having them go through, because you know your house better than everybody, is not technically unusual, because at the time it was a missing person case. Mm-hmm. But they should have never had everybody tromping out. They should have kept them isolated into one locale, not all over the house. And when they did find the body there, John never should have picked up the body. It should have been immediately closed off. So I can see a little bit of giving them, because they know your house better. If something moved, was there a door open that wasn't closed? John Jr.'s room supposedly wasn't used. Was that door open? Was a window open? Because a lot of the homes in Colorado, something that a lot of people don't know, is that on the higher levels, most of the homes had little porches or decks, and they had what was called an emergency ladder. I had one on my bedroom where you pop it open and had a ladder there and you could climb down. And unbeknownst to my mom and my dad, my brothers my brothers would climb down that ladder and sneak out. So they would sneak out and go to their friend's house or go party or whatnot. And then they would climb back up those ladders and go back in that door. Because what my parents didn't realize is that they set the alarm system, but there was a button on all of our doors on the inside of it that we could just push, and it would, if we bypass the alarm on the door, so we could get out those doors or those windows. But I don't think my mom ever knew that. So, I'm tattling a little bit on this one. So that's how we got out. I was too young. I was still a little kid. I was 9-10 years old when we had that. But a lot of them had that. Along with the
your next family gathering, she's going to punish all of the older ones.
Oh yeah, so that's how they got out.
Because I know you did it.
That's how they would get out, and they would sneak out and go do whatever they wanted to do. So, and that's the kind of things that they would be looking for. Where's the door open? Things like that. Because I guarantee it, and moms, dads out there who have teenagers, your kids are getting away with crap you probably don't know about. Some of the stuff Mike got away with, or my husband has gotten away with, and probably even Barb too, when she was young, probably would mortify our parents if they knew about it today. And I'm probably going to be getting a talking to from my mom when she sees this video. So, and probably my siblings as well.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, yes, that's a lot of the doors in Colorado had that, and the windows. Same thing with the windows, like in a basement. You had the window, and then it was like in this little cubby, like a half moon looking thing that surrounded the window. And it was an opening you could get. That's how if you were in the basement and you were trapped, you could open up that window. You would crawl into this little alcove-looking thing. It was like a half-moon thing. It wasn't that big. And you could crawl up there and it had a little ladder, and you could climb up and climb out of this little hole and onto the normal level of the house. And that's how you would get out. In wintertime, we always loved it. We would be downstairs and we could see it fill up with snow. So this time it probably may have been filled with snow or brush and things, whatever.
In the documentary, it showed the one at John and Benet's house. It, instead of being the half moon, it was a long one, and it had a grate which had the holes in it so that the rain could go down there, and it was about 4 or 5 feet deep, so any water wouldn't puddle up at the window and go in. It went down there, and then would evaporate or whatever.
Yeah, and we had a grate above ours too, but it had an opening. You had to push it open, and you could crawl out. Right. And trust my brothers, and I think I did a couple of times. So you would sneak out that way too. Yeah, we were sneaky a bunch. But it was that's how you'd get out. So there you go. For all people in Colorado, that's how you can get in and out. But so that became present later on in the investigation when they're trying to see did somebody go, because the window was broken on one of those doors or windows in the basement. So they thought, oh, maybe they went through that way.
It had been broken for a while. Yeah.
But again, the scale of the mistakes did become apparent after John Benet was found. They started in the basement. Later in the documentary, Who Killed John Benet by Channel 4 in London, John Ramsey describes what he's found. So these are exact words of what John Ramsey said when he found his daughter. As I was walking through the basement, I opened the door to a room and knew immediately I'd found her because there was a white blanket. Her eyes were closed, and I feared the worst, but yet I'd found her. Now, going back to what we said earlier, the room was pitch black. How do you see anything in a pitch black room without turning the light on?
Wait, but that basement, by the time they'd found her, it was starting to get light out. The windows would have let light in.
But it was not those down there. They don't let light in very well. They're very dark. And that was in the far end of the room. Where she was in a darkened part of the room where the light wasn't showing.
I guess they took liberties on the documentary to show it, so they show the area with the suitcase.
Well, it was according to Fleet, there was completely pitch black when that door was open. So How did you find her?
Yeah.
While the Ramseys went to stay with friends, their home became a major crime scene. As this was the only murder in Boulder that year, one murder at the end of the year, okay, hello. The investigating police had very little experience in that type of crime. With very few of them having conducted a murder investigation at all, regardless, they immediately assumed the Ramseys were guilty. The fact that JonBenet had been found in her own home by her father was considered highly suspicious. Duh. By the time her body had been taken from the house that evening, some of their suspicions had been passed to a local journalist. On December 27th, the Rocky Mountain News quoted an assistant district attorney saying, "It was very unusual for a kidnapped victim's body to be found at home. It's just not adding up."
Yeah.
According to Charlie Brennan, the journalist who wrote the story, the police had also indicated to him they held a strong belief that the parents were responsible. Julie Hayden, a television reporter for Denver's Channel 7, also covered the story on the same day and drew the same conclusion. She later explained from her first exposure to the case, the police had made it very clear that they were not scouring the area looking for some mad kidnapper or murderer, but instead concentrating their efforts on John and Patsy. Experts, media commentators, the Ramseys have identified potential suspects in the case. Police initially focused almost exclusively on John and Patsy. In October of 1997, had over 1,600 people in their index of persons of interest for the case. So, contrary to media and DA belief, they were not just focusing on John and Patsy. They had 1,600 people that they were looking at. And the problem with that is because the number of that people are, well, why
So many of those people were forced to sign NDAs.
Yes.
It's
not even that, though.
Yeah.
People were asking, why is the number so high? Well, because the DA kept on blocking things like getting DNA, getting financial records, getting phone records, getting this, getting that. They couldn't rule out anybody.
Yeah, that's true.
They said, okay, you know the family, okay, you're a person of interest. They couldn't rule out anybody because they weren't allowed to get the criminal investigation or the materials, the evidence necessary in order to be able to rule out people. It was not, they couldn't get it from the DA. So that's why there was so many people.
And they also couldn't talk to them to find out alibis or stuff like that. They were,
because they had NDAs. They were gag orders, in other words.
Yeah.
Errors were made in the initial investigation that complicated the resolution of the investigation and applicable theory. The errors included a loss and contamination of evidence, lack of experience and technical staff on the investigation, evidence shared with the Ramseys, and delayed informal interviews with the parents. Now, people are going, what evidence was shared with the Ramseys? Before the Ramseys were interrogated in April of 1997. Again, this is how many months later?
4 months later.
4 months later. Before they were interrogated or interviewed, the DA, again, person my father, Alex Hunter, gave to the Ramsey family the police reports of the investigation thus far.
A cheat sheet. They had the answers to all the questions.
So they knew what the police were looking at, what they were going to ask. So they were prepped and ready to go to cater their answers for whatever was necessary. So it was not a true, I would consider a valid.
Since they knew what was going to be asked, they could corroborate their sentences to each other, which is why they do them separately.
Yep. And they weren't even allowing Burke to be interviewed. Burke was not interviewed until much later as well. And the first initial interview with Burke, Burke was very erratic and abnormal behavior, and people thought, oh, he's guilty. And then very possibly he may be. But he does have autism. I've had a child at home with autism, so I know the signs and symptoms. And I also believe he may be suffering from sociopathy because of other behaviors that he sustained. So, there's a lot of hiding by the Ramsey family. And then when they did come out and things like the video of Burke and their videos to the news media, to CNN, on Oprah, and on all these other shows, it just made them look so guilty and so suspicious of committing this crime. So, it
or covering up for somebody.
Yeah. It didn't fit. And, people were like, he made that was the other thing. Burke also made the comment, in one of the videos that he was being interviewed, he made the statement, yelling out, don't touch me, was very, and that's very common also in autism. So there was a lot of signs and symptoms of autism in there. And had the Boulder police had the necessary, should have had a child investigative expert in there who knew about autism. And of course, back then it was relatively, yes, it was a known disorder, but there was not as prevalent as it is today. Yeah. But they still should have had somebody there who could have recognized that there is some psychological problem going on or developmental problem going on with Burke and be able to handle the investigation with Burke a little bit differently than it was handled.
Yeah.
This is coming from a mom who has seen my child being investigated or interrogated, and I'm like, no, you're going to have somebody who knows how to answer or ask questions of a child that has special needs. Burke was also interviewed 18 months after her death when he was 11 and a half years old. And, they were showing him, and this was in Atlanta, Georgia, after they had moved to Atlanta, Georgia. And they're showing him like a bowl of pineapple. And he kind of like, there's that battling, if he has sociopathy and he has autism, both those disorders are battled against each other. People with sociopathy are very structured. There's a lot of similarities, but when they're trying to hide from what they did, they're very smart and very intelligent. One is, it's just an authority figure. I have to respond. I have to answer. Whereas the other one is, I'm going to hide it. Yeah. And it's battling against each other in that interview, and you're seeing that. And it comes across looking very erratic, crazed, and he's fighting himself. He's fighting. He's
fidgeting really badly.
Fidgeting. He's moving. He kicked off his shoes, which is very common in autism.
This was in the documentary.
Yes,
it's shown, but and because it was stated that one of their favorite snacks was the pineapples with the milk on it. So for him to see a picture of that bowl and not be able to identify it, and show the behavior that he was doing, that was really weird.
And to kind of give you an idea, I'm going to go through this with you guys real quick. This is the timeline, the actual timeline of events on the day that she was murdered. Starting at 5:52 a.m., Patsy called 911. At 5:54 a.m., and these are all approximates again because we don't have the phone records to prove approximate,
right?
Proof definite. But approximately at 5:54 a.m., Patsy calls the Whites and the pastor to come over to sit with her. 5:59 a.m., the first officer arrives. After 6 a.m., this is when the friends started to arrive. The crime scene investigator, CSI, arrives. At 8:10 a.m., Detective Arnott arrives at the home. And at 8:15 a.m., the only FBI agent, because that was something that I'm going to go back to that here a second. I could never figure out why they didn't have more than one FBI agent, or FBI period.
Yeah.
And the Ramsey family said, no, you can bring FBI in, but only one. Which happened to be Ron Walker.
And it should never be up to them.
No, it shouldn't be. The DA put the entire control of this case into the hands of the Ramseys to cover the fact that if any possible wrongdoing that may have been interpreted. But 8:15 a.m., Ron Walker, who was the FBI agent, was contacted by Boulder police. At 11 a.m., Ron Walker does arrive at Boulder headquarters. 11:45, Walker meets with Sergeant Mason at the Boulder police headquarters to kind of get a rundown of what's going on, what's been done, who's there, all that good detail. About 10:30 a.m., Detective Arnott notices that John Ramsey has disappeared. Now, this becomes really important, so pay attention. 10:30 a.m., John Ramsey is missing, disappeared. Nobody can locate him. 12 o'clock, Detective Arnott notifies Sergeant Mason that John Ramsey is still missing. So it's an hour and a half later, and he's still missing. Approximately at 1:05, John Ramsey and Fleet White went downstairs after the detective. He reappears. The detectives go down and look. He makes a beeline for that door and finds JonBenét's body at 1:05, approximately at 1:05 p.m. on December the 26th. So about an hour and a half, almost 2 hours out of pocket, he was missing. When he came back, he seemed even more agitated than he was earlier. Like he was frustrated and, almost like, okay, let's get this done with, let's move on. Like it was, he couldn't hold the facade anymore.
Yeah.
It needed to be done, whatever. So at 11:45, Walker meets with Sergeant Mason, or Sherry said that, at the Boulder headquarters. But for an hour and a half out of pocket, he was missing. At 1 o'clock, that's when about the time that she speaks with, Fleet and White and tells him to go look for everything. He makes a beeline to it, and he says something about finding his daughter. I got to go find my daughter, which is kind of an odd statement for John to make when, at that time,
she was still
considered being a kidnap victim.
Yeah.
So why are you going to go search the house for your daughter when she's supposed, not even technically, to everybody's mind, at that moment in time, not supposed to be there?
Right.
So why is that statement made? So these are things that the police are looking at that the DA just kind of went, eh.
Yeah, because if in a case where a child is missing, where they don't know, and so now they're going to get search parties and stuff like that, they've got a ransom note that she is gone and with somebody else. So you wouldn't expect her to be there. If they're just missing and they're not sure if she's wandered off in the early hours, of course you're going to look at the house again. You might find her asleep, curled up in a closet, because she's been thought that was funny to hide. You never know. But why would he say that?
Yeah. After a ransom note, it just didn't make sense. And for the DA to kind of ignore that, along with everything else,
Another red flag.
Another red flag adds a very big air of suspicion. At 1:05, John Ramsey finds JonBenét's body and carries her upstairs. At 1:10 p.m., Detective Arden moves the body again, placing it by the Christmas tree. At 1:20, Ron Walker, the FBI, arrives at the crime scene and starts to close off the crime scene, starts to question people, and starts to do what you're supposed to do in this kind of scenario.
Yeah.
At 1:40 p.m., John Ramsey calls his pilot. This is bizarre to me. This right here is. 1:05, he finds his daughter's body. It's not even been 40 minutes. He's already calling his pilot and asks him to prepare his plane. Why does he want to leave?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want to stick around with the investigation, find out who did this to your daughter, find out what happened?
Yeah,
no, he wants to get out.
You cancel the plans to meet the family in Michigan, and the cruise is out of the question.
Have the family come there. Okay, we got, we need you here, for questioning and things like that. That's the normal thing. This trying to get out of town was not normal. 7 a.m., of course, Fleet White takes Burke to his home at 7 o'clock in the morning. So he takes him to his home. He's with, Burke is at his home with his friend, with his kids and their family, while he comes back to the house to be with John and Patsy. At 6:35 a.m., White arrives at the Ramsey home. Of course, then, as I said, I'm reversing this a little bit, and then takes Burke. At 5:30 p.m. on that's when the Ramseys arrived at the White family's party. That's when they got there, and they were from like 5:30 until about 9:30 when they left to go home. Because the Whites' home, where the party was the night before on Christmas night, was like 4 or 5, 6 houses. It was like right down the street, really, from where the Ramseys lived. They have dinner, they open presents. It's a party. They're all, visiting. You know how, Christmas parties are. About 9:30, the Ramseys leave the Whites' party. They return home. JonBenét's asleep. 9:20 p.m., John Ramsey carries the sleeping JonBené to the bed. And then it goes back to the 5:52 a.m. when Patsy wakes up and finds the note. So as you can see how, just read just the timeline. Any person can read this timeline and question several things on it. Like, why is he saying that? Why is he, calling this pilot? There's just a lot of things in the timeline that make you go, huh? and kind of give you the head tilt you see with dogs do, and question a lot of what was being investigated and what wasn't being investigated and what they were looking at and what they weren't looking at.
I could just imagine the FBI agent coming after they've moved the body twice. I could just imagine him walking again. What? Huh?
Yeah. I can, and he actually kind of said that. He walked in and he saw where the body was laying, and he's kind of like, it was, he had to do almost like a double take, because it was like something you'd see out of some kind of Agatha Christie murder mystery movie kind of thing, Huh? It was so movie-esque, which fits this whole bloody blooming thing.
And then the butler standing there with a candlestick.
Exactly, or Clue, or some of those comedy murder mystery kind of things that you see, which fits the family very well because of the ransom letter and all the moving quotes. So it was like a movie into itself in some respects. So, the Ron Walker was just kind of like, huh? But the evidence, a lot of this evidence was shared with the whole investigation was shared with the Ramseys, so they knew exactly where they sat and what to do to manipulate the situation to keep the investigators from looking at that. So, but next we're going to get into some of the investigators who were brought in, who were coming in to do some additional investigation after the initial one just didn't go anywhere. They're like, okay, we're going to start bringing in specialists. So we're going to start going into that next. So as we ended up in the last time, we ended up with the crime scene and the timeline and how everything was construed. And after the initial investigation, they started bringing in other, specialties and all these different kinds of specialty fields that the family brought in, which I think, I think pretty much were set up they set the scene up to show, because nobody else was allowed into this crime scene except for the family, and only the detectives and the specialty people that the family allowed, which speculates to me that they set up the crime scene. It was all staged for these people to come in and to look at it, to look at the evidence the way they wanted it to look at, not how it truly was. Such is the case with Lou Smith, was a detective who came out of retirement in early 1997 to assist the Boulder County District Attorney's Office, again, hired by Alex Hunter, and we all know about him with this case. In May of 1998, he presented his findings to the Boulder Police with other staff members of the DA's office. So not only did he do it, they basically, the whole entire DA's office was coerced. Most of them were. There were a few who thought, okay, the DA's overstepping and whatnot. But the other staff members of the DA's office, concluding that the evidence pointed away from the Ramsey family, they were unable to successfully challenge the police department's belief that the Ramseys were guilty. The DA's office sought to take control of the investigation due to the animosity between the police and the DA's office and the pressure to obtain a conviction. Colorado Governor Bill Owens interceded and named Michael Cain as special prosecutor to initiate a grand jury. So here it is. These two big factors you're supposed to be like this together are fighting. I wonder why. These you had Lou Smith and other specialists were trying to come in. The ones that the police were trying to hire to come in weren't allowed on the crime scene. They weren't allowed to do any of the investigation. But the DA can have anybody they wanted to come in, and the crime scene was basically closed off. It was like they were staging this whole thing to make sure that the investigation went in their favor. Which is pretty much what it's done. Up until recent years, when things have started to crumble. The two lead investigators in the case had opposing views. Both Lou Smith and Steve Thomas ultimately resigned because these two were hitting butting heads. Steve Thomas was the police. Lou Smith was on the DA side, and it was a headbutting, and it was like, okay, we're done, and they both stepped away and resigned. And the thing was, Mr. Steve Thomas was going on actual evidence that they had collected, prior to all this stuff going down. Lou was brought in after the fact and was looking at the crime scene after the initial investigation, after the family had retained the home again. So things could have been changed, it could have been altered to make it look like an insiders did this as opposed to an outsider.
Yeah.
just speculation. I'm not saying that'll happen, but it
Like the example of the suitcase not being in the earlier pictures.
Yeah. So, it fits the scenario. Now, again, this is just all speculation, but it's speculation that, as in Castle would say, fits the story. So, Smith believed that the investigation had incompetently overlooked intruder hypothesis. And Thomas, because the DA's office had interfered and failed to support the police investigation of the case. So they both had reasons, and legit reasons, but I think a lot of it was pushed because of the DA's manhandling of the whole case. It wasn't the police that did it. It was really the DA's office that really messed up this case. And I think it's because they were paid off. Truly, honestly, I believe they were paid off by the family to alter things, because they were a high-profile family. They were wealthy. And that was a known fact all over Colorado. So it's a pretty good bet that's what happened. Is it 100% guaranteed for facts? I can't tell you that. It's just speculation. But it's a pretty good speculation when most of the evidence is pointing in that direction. Yeah. And common sense is telling you that. And any behavior analyst, forensic analyst would probably tell you the same thing.
Yeah, all those red flags, they'll lead somewhere.
If they had the proper evidence that we've been presented. If Lou Smith had the evidence that we've been presented with today, I think he would truly agree that it was the Ramsey family, because I think he was only given a certain amount of evidence and given it in a certain way that to make it look like it was intruder when it truly wasn't. Yeah, is my guess. A grand jury convened in the beginning of September 15th, 1998, to consider indicting the Ramseys for charges relating to the case. In 1999, the grand jury returned a true bill to charge the Ramseys with placing a child at risk in a way that led to her death, with obstructing an investigation of murder due to John Ramsey's tampering with the crime scene. Based on the probable cause standard applied that in such grand jury proceedings. But the Boulder County District Attorney, Alex Hunter, here we go again, did not prosecute them because he did not believe he could meet the higher standard of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That is required for a criminal investigation. Now, we can alter that. He knew that there was reasonable, that you could prove guilt without a reasonable doubt. He didn't want that proved. So he did his way to manhandle the case to be able not to prove without a shadow of a doubt that the Ramseys were guilty. I mean, it's a big duh. Common sense would tell you that. Mary Lacy, the next Boulder County District Attorney, took over the investigation from the police on December 26, 2002. In April of 2003, she agreed with the federal judge who sat on the 2002 libel case that the evidence in the suit is more consistent with the theory of an intruder who murdered Jean Bonnet than it was the theory that Mrs. Ramsey did it. On July 9, 2008, the Boulder District Attorney's Office announced that the result of newly developed DNA sampling and testing techniques, touch DNA analysis, the Ramsey family members were excluded as suspects in the case, and Lacy publicly exonerated the Ramseys.
Only 3 of them.
Only 3 of them. Again, remind you that John Jr. was not in part of that group. And I think that was a really bad call because he did live in the home on a consistent basis during school year when he was going to college. So, yeah, I think that was really wrong. And I think that the other thing is, I think that a person in the police department needed to test the DNA because it was actually tested by the DA's department and not the police department. So the DNA could have been tampered with. They could say, oh, yeah, we did test Patsy's and John's and Burke's, but did they really? We don't really know. We know their claim, but
yeah.
So that again is just speculation. Again, on February 2nd, 2009, the Boulder Police Chief, Mark Beckner, announced that Stan Garnett, the new Boulder District Attorney, and again, as you can see, the Boulder District Attorney in this particular case was turning over from Alex Hunter to Lacy, because Alex left and went on some kind of huge thing. Then Lacy left, and then this new guy came in, and he was only in there for a while, too. or because certain specifications and regulations were put in place when Alex left, that when the new person came in, it's like, oh, you have to follow these or this could da. So he set it up so that no matter who was a district attorney at the time or who was in office, they still had to follow the things that were set in play by their predecessor, which is sucks beyond belief. But but Stan Garnett, the new district attorney, was turning the case over to his agency and that his team would resume investigating it. Garnett found that the statute of limitations for crimes identified in the 1999 grand jury true bill had expired and did not pursue the review of the case against the Ramseys. Now, he apparently doesn't understand statute of limitations. Statute of limitations against murder, homicide, never go. There is no statute of limitations. Statute of limitations for a sexual abuse to a child. The statute of limitations, I think, is like 30 years, 20 years, 30 years, something like that. But for murder, there is no statute of limitations. And that was, first-degree murder was on the grand jury indictment. So, sorry, D.A. Garnett, you're wrong. That one is, almost common sense. In October of 2010, the Boulder police reopened the cold case. New interviews were conducted following a fresh inquiry by a committee that included state and federal investigators. Police were expected to use the latest DNA technology in their investigation. And it goes back to the law that we discussed in their previous case last time with the Austin Yogershot murders, the Family Act thing that was passed where the families can ask for certain things to be pursued. In this case, it wasn't the family that asked for it. It was actually the police that asked for it, which lovely loophole that's in that new law. But police were expected to use again the new DNA technology in their investigation. There were no new information were gleaned from those interviews, and it was reported in 2016 that the investigation into JonBenét Ramsey's death continues to be an active homicide case per the police chief Greg Testa. As you can see, not only did the DAs get overturned, so did the police chiefs. So it's nobody wanted to be a part of it. Everyone was like, oh, I'm not touching this. It's like hot potato. Yeah. It was that kind of ordeal.
Goes on your permanent record.
Yes, it goes on your permanent record. This wasn't closed, this, that, and whatnot. So, but something else that I did want to mention is that the reason that there's no new information gleaned is because all those NDAs and gag orders were still in place. So they really could not get any information from anybody any more so than they had in the initial investigation in 96, 97. So, yeah. Didn't work. In 2015, Breckner disagreed with exonerating the Ramseys. So basically, he disagreed with D.A. Lacey, stating, exonerating anyone, this is his direct quote, by the way, exonerating anyone based on a small piece of evidence that has not been proved to be connected to the crime is absurd and wrong. He also stated that the unknown DNA from JonBenét's clothing has got to be the focus of the investigation. At this point in time, and until one can prove otherwise, the suspect of the donator of that the donator of that unknown DNA. Essentially, the blood that was in JonBenét's panties, which is a good thing to go off. It's blood. That is not touch DNA. Big difference. In 2016, Gordon Combs, a former investigator for the Boulder County District Attorney's Office, another individual here, also questioned a total absolution of the Ramseys, stating, we all shed DNA all the time within our skin cells. It can be deposited anywhere at any time for various reasons that are benign. To clear somebody just on the premise that of touch DNA, especially when you have a situation where the crime scene wasn't secure from the beginning, is really a stretch. Stephen E. Pitt. Oh, and by the way, shortly after Gomes said that, he was fired because he went against Alex's legacy, so to speak. Yeah. But Alex's thing where everybody had to be for the Ramsey family, that they didn't do it. And he went against that. He was agreeing with the police. He was like, oh, no, you're out of here. You know, one of these things don't belong. Yeah, you don't belong. Get out of here. So he was actually fired shortly after he made that statement. Stephen E. Pitt, a forensic psychiatrist hired by the Boulder Authority, said Lacey's public exoneration of the Ramseys was such a big slap in the face to Chief Breckner and the corps of group detectives who had been working on this case for years. It's basically saying everything that we've done, all the work we've done, the 1,600 plus leads that we have, doesn't matter. Who cares? Moving on. And so it was really a big slap in the face of the Boulder police, who had been working so hard, so diligently against all the odds they had. It just was like, we don't care. We don't give a damn what you did. You're done. Blah! And away it went. So, So as you can see, this case has just been up and down, a lot of misleads, a lot of interdepartment fighting from the DA, police, and of course the Ramseys doing whatever it is the Ramseys were doing. By December 28th, various local news sources made it clear to their readers that the Ramseys were the principal suspects in the case. So this is December 26, 1996. While police made few comments regarding any evidence, they had to implicate the parents. The media began to cite their own evidence. The first clue they focused on was the supposed lack of footprints in the snow surrounding the house, which suggested that someone inside was responsible. Later, the media admitted that this opinion was based on an official report from a policeman at the scene who noted, strange, no footprints. The next item was also gleaned from the police report. It stated that there were allegedly no signs of forced entry, which at the time there was no snow around the area, so there was no footprints, and it didn't look like there was any forced entry at the time the initial police officers had arrived on the scene. The mayor of Boulder, Leslie Durgan, added further weight to the story when she appeared on the television stating, and this is a direct quote from her, "By all reports, there was no visible signs of forced entry. The body was found in a place where people were saying someone had to know the house. The facts surrounding the so-called evidence tell a completely different story. The first point to come under scrutiny was the snow cover. News video footage shot on December 26 clearly shows that large areas surrounding the house had no snow cover at all. In support of this, Julie Hayden, the television reporter, states, and this is a direct quote from her, "We looked at the videotape once footprints in the snow started becoming an issue. And one of the things I observed was there did not seem to be snow going up to the doors, windows, or anything else surrounding the home. So in my opinion, the thing about footprints in the snow has always been much ado about nothing, because it seemed clear to me that people could have gotten into the house whether they did or not without traipsing through the snow. Even with the blatant visual evidence that proved that their theory was groundless, the story continued to be told. Even more doubtful was the claim that no forced entry. The police report on December 26th noted that there were a number of open windows and at least one open door. Therefore, an intruder would not need to break in. One possible point of entry was the basement window. Not only was it easily accessible via a ground-level lift-out grill, it was broken sometime before Christmas, could not be secured. These facts, although well documented by police, did not come to public attention until several years after the event." So now we move into the intruder theory. You've been hearing a lot of us talk about inside or outside. This is the intruder theory that was out there. In mid-March, retired detective Lou Smith outlined a previously undisclosed evidence that led him to believe that John and Patsy Ramsey were not responsible for their child's death. "I believe there is evidence of an intruder. I believe people should still be looking for him," Smith said. "There is a dangerous guy out there." According to Smith, the evidence included a metal baseball bat found outside the Ramsey Boulder's home. Fibers on the bat matched the carpet found in the basement near the storage room where John Bonet's body was found. "The bat was found in a place where kids normally wouldn't play," Smith said, declining to elaborate. So, as you know, we just said that the metal baseball bat. I had three brothers, one in particular who played baseball, which is my brother Jason, and we had it downstairs, we had it in the garage, we had it against the, sometimes my mom would pick it up and would use it for security sometimes, and if it was left in the grass, because they did have a gardener, a lot of times my brothers, and myself too, or his friends and stuff would be playing outside, and we leave our wiffle ball bat in the yard, and my dad would come along and have to mow the yard. He'd pick up the toys and he'd lean it against somewhere so he could
fling it
fling it onto the driveway or whatever as he's doing the yard work. And they had a gardener, so if Burke, who's one of Burke's friends, left it in the grass, naturally it's going to be put up somewhere until just to get it out of the way so they can do the gardening and the landscaping.
Yeah.
So I can outroll that one. Part of the other theory was DNA evidence indicates John Benet's attacker was male, but the DNA does not match John Ramsey. That's one person. There's still Burke, there's still Patsy, there's still John Andrew. It could have matched one of those three. Or any other member of friends or things like that who are also in the home as well. So, the peanut-shaped foam packing material and leaves found in the basement that Smith thinks might have been tracked and sought by someone entering through the broken basement window. It would have been something that would not have blown in there, Smith said. Yes and no.
I would think that the blowing in would be easier than being tracked in.
Yeah. Because of where it is, and lace foam said they do stick to everything, but at the same time, the way with that window open and broken, a lot of those things is kind of like a wind tunnel. It could blow it right out in.
With the grate though, with the grate though, it could go sliding across and into the wind. It could go in by the wind.
Yeah.
But I don't think it would have been tracked in.
No. So it didn't fit, and where it was in relation and stuff. The packing peanuts they're already down in the basement. Mm-hmm. How would they get tracked in from outside if they're already in the basement?
Yeah.
So that particular part of the theory never truly made sense to me. Smith was not only an experienced detective, he had been credited for solving one of Colorado's most baffling crimes, the murder of 13-year-old Heather Dawn Church in her Black Forest home in 1991. Smith was asked to come out of retirement to take over the case. Heather Church had vanished from her home one evening while her mother and two brothers attended a scout meeting. 2 years later, her skeletal remains were found miles away in a ravine west of Colorado Springs. With the trail truly cold but still prominent in the public's mind, newly elected El Paso County Sheriff John Anderson asked Smith to lead the investigation in 1995. Smith agreed and examined all evidence, focusing his attention on a set of unidentified fingerprints found in the Church home. He directed his detectives to begin sending prints to every state and local law enforcement offices in the country. After contacting 92 different jurisdictions, a Louisiana police department matched the prints to Robert Charles Brown, a paroled thief who had moved to Colorado and was still living a half-mile from the Church home 3 years after the killing. Brown later confessed that he had killed Heather with a blow to the head when he discovered him burglarizing the home. Sheriff Anderson had been trained in homicide investigation under Smith before becoming a sheriff. He has great respect for Smith's abilities. This is a direct quote. He always had a sound method that started with the evidence and let it guide him towards the truth, rather than starting with the theory and focusing on the evidence to fit it. And this is where I have to, because I knew of Smith and I knew Smith's credibility. So this is why I think the scene had to be staged in a way for him to look at the evidence to make it look like an intruder.
Right.
He was too good of a investigator to
make that mistake.
Make that mistake with all the other evidence at hand. So he, in my mind, because he doesn't look at the evidence directly, he looks at the theory and then builds the evidence or whatever. That he didn't get all the evidence and he didn't realize all the other parts of the pieces of the puzzle. So that's what I truly believe happened. I think he was just a pawn in a really crappy game that the DA and the Ramseys were playing.
Which is unfortunately damages his credibility in the future.
It does. It does. In the same article, Newsweek also reported that he had asked Arapahoe County Coroner Dr. Michael Doberson to review evidence from Smith with a stun gun used on JonBenét. According to the magazine, Doberson was provided with pictures that the police had never shown him. Doberson was quoted as saying that the stun gun theory was compelling. It just looked to me superficially in that it fits, Doberson saying. It looks like somebody, and when you look at the documentary that both Barbara and I watched, and they had a grown man, big guy, stocky build, lay on a bed. They zapped him with a stun gun, and he just jumped and flew off the thing. And then they did it again. This time, skin from the stun gun actually right onto the skin
on his back where she was.
And he just jumped up. He's like, "Get that thing away from me!" I mean, it energized him. And they're saying,
the whole thing with the stun gun theory is supposedly that's what subdued her so that he could take her downstairs. No, little child like that getting hit with one.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, there's this slim possibility it could have knocked her out too much of it and zapped her to submission.
But I would think, don't they make sounds? It's electronic, doesn't it?
Yeah, because zip sound, like a zap sound. But it's not like a shotgun.
No, I know.
It's you can hear if you're in the same room, you could hear it, but you wouldn't hear it across the house.
She wouldn't have heard.
So,
but still.
But the measurement of the two electrodes on the end of the stun gun was within a millimeter of the two injuries on the little girl's chin, like right about here on her chin. Did that and zapped it up to her. He also noticed a small metal bar on the weapon also could have left the mark. Doberson noted that any stun gun wounds on JonBenét would have not been lethal. There is some danger in making a decision based on photographs without having talked to people who did the autopsy and who saw the injuries, he said. Also in the documentary, they also did view the stun gun theory, and there were metal train tracks for electric train right in the room next to the room that JonBenét was found in. And
big tabletop set. So there was a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, when they're really like you're not doing synchronized swimming moves. But this large table that had metal train tracks and the two ends that would connect into each other to connect them together.
Yeah, those pins.
Those pins match the markings on the back. So it makes you wonder, what happened. Because I can't imagine that would be more likely to stick something up there, you see it in some torture devices. There's one, I can't remember the name of it.
Oh yeah.
But it sits right.
That hurts.
It sits right here at the base of your throat, and it goes at an angle, and it's right here at your chin, and it's a thing here, and it's wrapped around your neck, and it's basically it holds you to keep your mouth shut so someone can do physical harm to you, but you can't open your jaw. And if you try to struggle, the thing that's holding your chin closed will dig into your chin.
Yeah.
So it looks like that kind of old device. And there's an episode of Criminal Minds called Identity that you can actually go watch the episode. They actually show the device to keep the mouth closed, as well as the pair of anguish. That one you all can go find and discover for yourself. Because when I found out what that was, hell no. So, happy investigating on that one. But again, Chief Beckner said that he was already familiar with Smith's theory that the stun gun was used on JonBenét. I can say we have evidence to the contrary. He also said that he was disturbed that Smith decided to talk about the evidence in an unsolved case. He was willing to go out and talk about his theory, but in doing so, he ignores a lot of other evidence, Beckner said. And that's why I think that he was only given a select section of evidence. He was only given, the DA only gave him enough evidence to show that it was an insider, not all of the evidence that was truly, truly there. And I also think that for him to go out and actually talk about but that was the only downside and the only thing I had to say against Smith is the fact that he did go out and he did talk about an open and unsolved case and, kind of revealing a lot of evidence, even and kind of giving the Boulder Police Department a really bad image. Yeah. And that's unfair, especially when we don't know what happened. We don't really can go on the evidence that we have in hand. And if you truly didn't have all the evidence, that's basically, not doing good things for the Boulder Police. Mm-hmm. The Boulder County Coroner, John Mayer, declined to comment on Doberson's opinion. Some weeks later, John and Patsy continued to promote Smith's intruder theory when they gave an interview on ABC's 2020 program. They also suggested the police should look to the Ramseys' inner circle to find their daughter's killer, perhaps someone who was familiar with the family might be a pedophile. The Ramseys said they believed that an intruder may have waited for hours in their home before strangling and beating JonBenét. I can't believe that we have ever knowingly met anybody that can be this vicious, but someone killed our daughter, so we have to start looking. We start at the inner circle and keep moving out, Patsy Ramsey said. And ironically, I actually kind of agree with her a little bit on the starting in the circle and working your way out. That's typically how police investigate. Mm-hmm. But
they're starting on the circle just
outside of
him.
When you're doing a crime, you start the outer circle, or the circle starting with the victim, and the next circle out would be her mom and dad and Burke and John Andrew. And they never ruled out any of those four by any stretch of the imagination. They were just ignored. They said, well, we're going to go to the next ring out, and out, and out, and out, and out, and so on and so forth. So she's on the right track. She's just excluding them from being a part of that investigation, which they, to my knowledge, have yet to do. The Ramseys also accused the police of ignoring such evidence as a handprint and DNA that could not be matched to family members or friends. Well, they didn't test all family members. Right. So, or to our knowledge, you can also look at, how do we know that the DNA that was tested against you guys was truly your DNA? We don't know. Yeah. Later, when appearing on the Today Show, John Ramsey again suggested that people assume an intruder killed JonBenét. He asked the public to contact authorities if they had any leads. I'm going to try and persuade, this is a direct quote, by the way, I'm going to try to persuade people that I'm innocent, but that's not important here. I want people to be objective and listen and think, because that's how the crime is going to be solved, he said. Something else that I thought was also interesting is when he appeared on CNN, that very first one in January 1st, he actually makes the comment, I don't remember the exact words, but essentially it was meaning that, it was victory that the police got to talk to them, or this was done, or that was done. And it's like, why is it a victory? It's just weird. It was just a weird statement to make, that it was almost, he was vindicated, that, that they did it. We finally had it. The Boulder police should be vindicated and should be proud that we actually came in and gave an interview or something like that. And I'm like, really? That just sounds so like boasting. Yeah. It was odd, just vernacular. What they were saying was correct, but their actions were not incorrect, or they didn't. Yes, they weren't. This is what you need to do. But because of how they controlled the DA, the police weren't allowed to do exactly what they were saying. Yeah. So it's like, okay. Sadly, Smith resigned from Hunter's office in September of 1998 after Hunter decided to take the investigation to the grand jury. Smith said he quit in part because he believed Boulder police and prosecutors had developed tunnel vision and were focusing only on the Ramsey family and not other suspects. A couple of interesting theories found by Barb. As we began to research this case, she discovered a lot of some stuff. So, here's Barb with her take on some things.
Reddit dives and all these others.
The outsider theories.
The court of public opinion is out of order. Who killed JonBenét Ramsey? As usual, everyone has pet theories pointing every which way. And the debates get pretty heated, especially with the top three being her own family. Compromised and contaminated crime scene aside, the parents successfully refusing to be interrogated for 4 to 5 months. Suspected of buying the DA, the preposterous ransom note, that just is still ridiculous to me. The we will contact you time came and went, and no one even noticed. Patsy was known to have a temper, and she washed JonBenét's bedwetting sheets herself instead of leaving them for the housekeeper. Hide the problems, images everything. Lots
But
of,
she also probably might have been hiding the fact that John Bonet was possibly sexually abused, because in the triad for
yeah,
Yeah, it
which I was
shows-
just going to say.
yeah, go
The
ahead.
lots of speculation on John's suspected frequent sexual abuse of John Bonet, which is chronic bedwetting, a classic sign of maybe John Bonet was looking like she might tell her mom about him and he snapped. That's one of the theories about him. Burke was very possibly undiagnosed and unmedicated on the autism spectrum and had behavioral issues, rage, jealousy, scatological acting out. He smeared feces on walls, left some in John Bonet's bed a couple of nights before she was killed, even smeared it on her chocolates. He even smacked her in the face with a golf club once. The parents would certainly try to cover up any worse misdeeds. Image.
funny note real quick, when I first we were writing the script
Oh.
out, and we saw the word, which is that word,
Scatological.
scatological. Both myself, who am, I've done this, I'm in this field, had no
Yeah.
clue what it was. My husband had no clue what it was. I even asked my mother, and she's in the medical field, had no idea what it was. What the heck is this? And we looked it up, and it's basically the study of poop. It's literally what it is.
But
I'm like,
yeah,
I've never heard- yeah.
scatological acting out is when kids use it as their paint on canvas.
Yeah. So, yeah, I had no idea what it was. So she taught me something in an ew way.
Yeah.
But, it's something just a funny thing that
Well,
happens.
and
when we're
also, you'd
investigating.
never heard of doxing.
Yeah, that was the other one.
That was from a different case,
case.
but she had never heard of that.
She's using words that are from the 60s and 70s criminal investigating
Well,
stuff.
not doxing. That's new.
That's new.
That's,
yeah.
But the scatological is,
Yeah.
well, it's also the scatological in people who study animals and tracking. The scatological evidence. That's like that. But anyway, now as for the theory of an outsider, a blonde young man was seen outside their home the day before the murder. Cigarette butts were found in the alley within a clear view of John Bonet's window. It was theorized that he had entered through that basement window, roamed around while the family was at the party, had time to write the cruel ransom note, hide in the huge house until he took John Bonet to the basement, 4 floors down, and leave after doing dirty deeds. 9 months later, a similar cigarette butts were found after someone broke into a nearby house while in the same neighborhood. While the family was gone, a perpetrator hid, waited until they came home, and assaulted their 6-year-old daughter while the mom was sleeping. She woke up and interrupted the intruder, who fled. The girl, Amy, was in John Bonet's dance class. The other outsider theory regarded Michael Landon Helgoth. He committed suicide 2 months after the murder, one day after DA Alex Hunter announced that they were narrowing the search for John Bonet's killer. He had a stun gun near his body, as well as high-tech boots. It's a brand, like shoe prints in the basement. They were like there were shoe prints that in the dust that you could read the word high-tech. Burke had a pair too, but obviously different size. But later, investigators mentioned he was right-handed, but the bullet entered on his left side. Suicide, remember. Plus, he was shot through a pillow. If he killed himself, why muffle with a pillow? That's kind of suspicious. Mm-hmm. So, back to you.
But going back on there, the other person that they had looked at was Bill McReynolds and his wife. Bill McReynolds was Santa Claus. He played the Santa Claus at the party that the family was at the night before, and also in the neighborhood. He was the neighborhood Santa Claus, is what people would call him. And his wife had written a story about the exact same thing that happened to JonBenet. But she said she was waiting to cope with the grief of losing their own daughter in a similar fashion. But their neither DNA from either one of them matched, and so that they were thrown out. Another person that was looked at was it was a sex offender, Greg Olivia. He was arrested for carrying a photo of JonBenet. They were suspecting him as being the blonde guy that she was talking about with the cigarettes. But I don't think they ever actually could prove it. So he was the one that they looked at. And then, of course, John Mark Carr, who was arrested in Thailand for the murder of JonBenet, but turned out that it was all a hoax. And we'll get into that a little bit here in a little bit.
And those were in the documentary, wasn't it?
They were. But there are other people that were looked at. Gary Olivier was very close. They was in the same class with JonBenet and the cigarettes and things like that. But I think it was rolled up again because the DNA didn't match, if I remember correctly. But continuing on Friday, March 16th, the Ramsey's book, Death of an Innocent, officially went on sale. It was a 396-page book, which is an emotional account of the Ramsey's life since JonBenet was killed. It includes sharp criticism of how the case was mishandled, how John and Patsy believe it can be solved, and the book outlines 7 key pieces of evidence that they think might help to find the murderer, and names several names of possible suspects. Now, I think it's highly interesting. They write a book about what happened to their kid, but they will not let anybody else investigate. It's just, it's the whole scenario is preposterous. Not only are they blocking the case, they're making money on it now.
Yeah.
Hello? Do you need any more evidence out there, people? We're going to keep going. Just you wait and see. You'll see what I mean.
But there's more.
Yes. These are the 7 key pieces. One of Ramsey's former housekeepers who may have intended to kidnap JonBenet because she was having money troubles. A man who played Santa Claus at the Ramsey Christmas party, including one the week JonBenet was killed, and that was, of course, Bill McReynolds. A former Access Graphics employee who Ramsey writes was extremely agitated with me after he left Ramsey's company. Okay. Possibility there, but highly unlikely. A former freelance writer whose girlfriend reported he was acting suspiciously the day after the murder and seemed overly agitated by the killing. That's to me, okay, so your boyfriend's acting also, he's automatically the killer of a...
Yeah.
It's those kind of those moments when you just want to scratch your head and just say, you out of the gene pool. You get that feeling. In response to the book's allegations, Boulder Chief Police Mark Beckner later told reporters that all of the people named in the book have been individually investigated and are not considered active suspects. The book also details evidence that Ramsey's want re-examined, including DNA found under JonBenet's fingernails, the cord found around the neck and the duct tape across her mouth, a pubic hair found on her blanket, a ransom note, the stun gun that might have been used to subdue her, a palm print found on the cellar door, and a footprint of high-tech hiking boot found near her body. Now, remind you, they did investigate all these things, and the boot was matched to Burke. The palm print was matched to John Sr., it was something he may have hit. The stun gun, they said, no, that can't subdue her, it's going to, jolt her awake.
Yeah.
The ransom note, which was pointing Patsy. The pubic hair was what they had the DNA on, and they're waiting to match that DNA that was found on that. The cord in the neck also had DNA on it, which they're trying to match. And the DNA underneath JonBenet's fingers, they're also trying to match. So they are investigating those, just maybe not to the satisfaction that, the family wants. It also provides a profile of the murderer being a male pedophile between the ages of 25 and 35, who may be an ex-convict who used the techniques he saw in the movie Ransom, which was playing in Boulder shortly before JonBenet's murder. The Ramseys speculated the suspect's original intention may have been to use a stun gun to immobilize JonBenet and kidnap her for the $118,000 demanded in the ransom note. They offer the theory that the attacker's plan could have failed when JonBenet woke up and recognized her attacker, turning the would-be kidnapper into a killer. They write, when the suspect's background, post-murder behavior, and physical evidence are put together, the identity of this monster will be clear to someone who knows him. They believe that the killer entered the home while they were at the Christmas Eve dinner party at the home of Fleet and Priscilla White. They further believe the intruder may have known the layout of the home after touring it during a historic Boulder Homes tour in Christmas of 1994, 95, and 96, and could have become aware of John's business successes through the local newspaper stories. When questioned regarding the accuracy of the information he received, reporter Charlie Brennan stated that up until March of 1997, he and other members of the press did not know that there was a broken window in the basement and believed that this police source had fed him false information. The reality of the situation is that an intruder could have easily entered the house through the basement window and moved around the house virtually undetected and unheard. JonBenet's bedroom is one floor below her parents' bedroom, a total distance of 55 feet of walkways covered by thick carpeting, making it ideal for a soundless approach. Furthermore, there is no hidden room. A carpeted spiral staircase a few feet from her room leads down to the kitchen. From the kitchen is only a few steps to the door that leads down to the basement stairs. At the bottom of the stairs is a short corridor that leads directly to the room where her body was found. Next to come under attack was the love of the family's grief. Vanity Fair quoted a policeman saying that on the first morning, Patsy Ramsey, while weeping, had been peering through him like this, through splayed fingers. Family and friends who were present at the time tell a far different story, describing how John and Patsy were so overcome with grief that they were unable to talk without crying. Their opinion was quickly dismissed as being biased, because anybody who was talking to them, John was no emotion. He never showed emotion, which I think he's where Burke may have gotten the sociopathic tendency, because I think that he is that as well. But he had showed no emotion. Patsy was doing it through her fingers. There are pictures, there's video clips of Patsy sitting there doing that.
When you did see her, I never saw any tears.
Yeah.
The old crocodile tears thing.
So, by Monday, December 30th, the Ramseys had returned to Atlanta to bury JonBenet. Again, another story was being released concerning how they got there. According to the article written by John Brennan, John Ramsey flew his family to Atlanta in his private jet. JonBenet's funeral took place New Year's Eve, 1996, at her parents' family church in Atlanta. That day, the family had to shield the Ramseys from the growing hostility that the media coverage had created. Even as they buried their daughter, a news story emerged revealed that John and Patsy had hired several criminal lawyers, which they did. Although Mike Bynum hired the attorneys, it is seen as another indication of the parents' guilt. Alarmed by the mounting criticism, Bynum and the members of the family urged the Ramseys to go onto television and defend themselves. The following day, they appeared on CNN. One of the questions raised during the interview was, do you believe that someone outside your home killed JonBenet? Patsy answered in a tearful voice, this is a direct quote, there is a killer on the loose. I don't know who it is. I don't know if it's a he or she. But if I were a resident of Boulder, I would tell my friends to keep their babies close to you. Rather than explain their point of view, the broadcast only served to bolster the theory that the Ramseys were pretending and would rather talk on television than talk to the police, the true people who can solve the case of what happened to their baby girl. The next day, Mayor Leslie Duren gave a press conference to reject Patsy's claim, stating, people in Boulder have no need to fear. There is no need to fear that there is someone wandering the streets of Boulder, as been portrayed by some people, looking for children to attack. Boulder is safe. It's always been a safe community and continues to be a safe community. The Ramseys were outraged. They simply couldn't understand why someone such as Mayor Durgan would say such things so publicly, when it was obvious to them that JonBenet's killer was still out there. During a 1997 interview, Durgan explained her reasons for making the announcement. It was done in a large part to allay the fears of children in our community and to let people know that information that I had at that time was that we did not have some crazy person wandering around the streets of University Hill or Boulder. There are two primary theories about JonBenét's death. One is the family member theory. Boulder police initially concentrated, most exclusively upon the parents, which is John and Patsy Ramsey. According to Greg McCary, a retired profiler for the FBI, statistically it is 12-1 probability that the family member or caregiver who is involved in the homicide of the child. Police saw no evidence of forced entry, but they did see evidence of staging of a scene, such as the ransom note. They did not find the Ramseys cooperative in helping them solve the death of their daughter. The Ramseys said that their reluctance was due to fear that there would not be a full investigation for the intruders, and that they would be hastily selected as key suspects in the case. However, when John and Patsy Ramsey appeared on ABC's 2020 program to discuss their book, of all things, they continued to assert that they had made every attempt to cooperate with the police investigation and had offered to undergo lie detector tests to prove their innocence. The following day, Chief Bruckner told reporters that the Ramseys' claims of having been cooperative with police detectives investigating their daughter's slaying was pretty much a smokescreen.
Mm-hmm.